Welcome to episode 4 of the Nine Trials of Tribulation by We Are Doing Our Best Studios. My name is Cassidy Zhang.
I'm Brendan Matthews.
And this is Summer Belcher.
Before we get started, we would like to mention today's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by 6 minutes into Lecture 3C when Professor Godsey had to stop the lecture because he accidentally said thank you at the end of one of his points and was laughing so hard he couldn't continue. I also don't know why you said thank you, but I'm so glad you did. It made me have to stop the lecture because I was laughing. For the record, I didn't know you said it until you pointed it out. Thank you. A quick note. The materials discussed in this episode of Nine Trials are the work products of Professor Mark Godsey, author of Blind Injustice, JusticeForSeanEllis.com, Sean Ellis' initial defense team, Sean's final defense attorney and fiercest advocate, Rosemary Scapicchio, and the team dedicated to the creation of the Netflix docuseries Trial 4. Episode 1 gave a brief outline of how Sean Ellis found himself tried 3 times for a crime he did not commit. On September 26, 1993, Detective John Mulligan was found dead in his car after being shot execution-style while he worked a private detail overnight in front of Walgreens. When he was found, Detective Mulligan had 5 bullet wounds in his head resembling a cross, including one up his nose, and his work gun and personal gun were missing. Shortly after the murders, Sean Ellis, then 19 years old, was dragged into the case by coincidence. 3 days after the murder, 2 of Sean's cousins, Celine Kirk and Tracy Brown, were victims of a double homicide in Tracy's apartment. Sean had recently moved in with his cousins, so he was taken in for questioning. During this time, he was asked if he knew anything about Mulligan's murder, and Sean told the police that he had been at the Walgreens that morning purchasing diapers with Celine. Police were able to turn this into evidence by producing witnesses that testified they saw Sean crouching by the detective's car. The missing guns were also found near Sean's apartment. Unlike Curtis's trials, which spanned over the course of decades, all 3 of Sean's trials occurred within a year. The first trial in January 1995 resulted in a hung jury with 9 to 3 moving to acquit him. The second trial in March was also hung, but this time more jurors voted in favor of guilt. The jury in the third trial, occurring in September, convicted Sean of first-degree murder and robbery. Sean was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 1998, Sean's attorney, Zalkind and Duncan, submitted a motion for a new trial after detectives Sarah and Robinson, both of whom worked on Sean's case, were found guilty of corruption. In 1999, this motion was denied. In February 2000, Zalkind and Duncan appealed the denial of the retrial motion. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court denied the appeal in December of that year. On December 24, 2003, Sean wrote a letter to Rosemary Scapicchio begging her to take his case after he had heard she had fought for the freedom of another Black man wrongfully incarcerated for murder. In 2004, Scapicchio took on Sean's case and began representing him. She began filing Freedom of Information Act requests after taking his case, but it took 7 years before they began coming in. In 2013, Scapicchio submitted a motion for a new trial with evidence of Mulligan's corruption that had been withheld. In June 2014 and April 2015, there were evidentiary hearings to consider the motion. On May 15, 2015, Judge Ball vacated Sean's 1993 conviction, allowing for a new trial. Sean was released on bail on June 3, 2015, with a GPS tracker. In 2016, Sean was offered a plea deal, which he rejected. On December 17, 2018, it was announced the Commonwealth would formally drop all charges against Sean for the murders. Sean's GPS was removed the following day, and he tasted true freedom for the first time in nearly 22 years.
Grab a drink and let's chat.
After that great in-depth discussion about Curtis Flowers, I think now would be a really great time to transition into talking about how Sean Ellis has faced many of the same issues just in Boston instead of Mississippi. I know something that we're all itching to talk about is the corruption that flooded the Boston Police Department in the 80s and 90s. How do you think that corruption, specifically with detectives Sarah Robinson, Brazel, and Mulligan, influenced Sean's case? Do you think he would be where he is today if it had not been for that?
I mean, I think that's at the core of Sean's case. They repeatedly showed that, especially Sarah and Robinson, during the investigation of Mulligan's murder, were the only two officers that were coming up with evidence against Sean Ellis. They were the only two out of probably 100 officers in the entire Boston police force investigating this case that were finding evidence. And just, it was piece of evidence after piece of evidence. They were finding a witness, or they were finding a gun, or this and that. And so that by itself should raise eyebrows in the DA's office, that in that big of an investigation, only these two officers are finding evidence. And then the fact that they go on and these officers are convicted of, what were they doing? They were
robbing drug dealers
of their drug money. So they were going out into these communities where there were known drug dealers. They were finding these just low-level drug dealers that were just doing little petty transactions, bringing them into their custody and saying, well, I'll let you go. You just got to give me the money.
Well, there was even cases that they were doing where they were, doing these drug busts, and they were falsifying warrants to get these drug busts. And then all of a sudden they turn these drugs in, but there's no money.
No money.
I think the percentages were 21% of Robinson and Sarah's, their turn-ins for drugs had money, but like 63 to 66% of every other, I think it was precinct or county in the area, turned in money when they turned in drugs. So clearly they were withholding evidence. It was pitiful.
Well, my question is, when's the last damn time that you heard of a drug dealer not having money on him or her?
Well, I don't really know that much about drug dealers, but
I mean,
never.
Never, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, you have these two cops that are, out there shaking down people for money and getting convicted of these things, but yet they were the lead on this case for Sean. And my favorite part on it is, one of them, Brazel, he turns on him.
Yep.
He was right there and with them.
Well, and they got caught.
Yeah, so he turned state evidence, and then come to find out later on, as Sean's case is getting reviewed by his new attorneys, and she finds that Mulligan had been with them in some of their corruption issues.
Yep.
But mind you, it took 11 years for her to get that information because
it wasn't turned over.
The police department was trying to withhold it because they didn't want it to come to light that their officers were doing this, or that the detective that had been killed was involved in this. So it took 11 years.
Yeah.
11 years for that discovery to be turned over.
Yeah, I mean, they were withholding evidence as much as possible. I mean, they didn't want, it to look bad on the dead cop, because who wants to be the one to speak out about the dead cop? Right. But it wasn't even just the two that went to prison. Mulligan himself was dirty.
Yep.
He got in trouble with the police department because he was turning in fraudulent overtime hours.
Yep.
And he's out here, having sex with, underage or barely legal prostitutes in exchange for drugs.
In his cop car.
In his cop car. Where's he getting these drugs from? He's getting them from drug dealers that
Where's he getting the prostitutes from? Why not Krusty Pete?
I mean, it's just, but none of this comes out. They don't give this information over. And they damn sure didn't want to give that information about the the connection between Mulligan and the dirty cops.
Yep.
Because if Mulligan's dirty, then all of a sudden we've opened up a whole world of suspects.
Well, and it's like what we were talking about in the previous episode with the Curtis Flowers case and how Doug Evans withheld Brady evidence from Curtis's defense team. Same thing here. The DA's office, the Boston Police Department, they withheld Brady evidence from the myriad of attorneys that took on the Sean Ellis cases. And I mean, to this day, Sean has been not necessarily exonerated, but at least the DA dropped charges against him. His defense attorney in the most recent trial still never received the full amount of discovery or Brady evidence that would have, exonerated him. So it's a systemic issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, they're sitting here, sitting on this information because, like I said, why are you going to turn it over? You turn that over, and now we've got reasonable doubt.
Yep, more than reasonable doubt.
But that's all they need is reasonable doubt.
Yep. They don't have a case if they turn this over.
Absolutely not. Because now, I mean, look at the way he was shot. That was personal.
Yep.
That wasn't some random person that pulled up at a Walgreens to buy diapers for a baby, and his buddy that gave him a ride
with his cousin
gonna, just say, okay, you know what? This guy's sitting here. We're just gonna shoot him in the head and steal his service weapon. My next question is, on to the service weapon question real fast. Sorry to detour. How did they know he was a cop? Because here, he's not in uniform, according to the information that we've, looked at or heard or watched. He's not in a police car. He's in his personal vehicle.
Right.
So how would they even know that he had a gun on him?
Well, and they also, in the Netflix documentary, went into the fact that when he was doing his prostitutional escapades, it was frequently in this Walgreens parking lot. So the people that murdered Officer Mulligan had to know that he frequented this Walgreens parking lot, that he was a cop, and that he would have a service weapon. So it is clearly personal. Like somebody knew who he was, knew he would be there, and execution style murdered him.
I mean, yeah, because they had to be up close and personal because there was very little blood spatter.
Right.
When they shot him, it was at point blank range.
5 times.
5 times. Once up his nose.
Yep.
There was no noise because no one heard a gun going off. And the window is barely cracked. So the person would not be able to make the pattern on his face that the gun made. So either someone had to climb through the car on the other side, or it just didn't happen the way they said it happened.
Right. And now I think you're going further into corruption of just past these cops. Now you're into corruption and cover-ups of the entire investigation team. Because they come in and they pull up, and the first thing that, they do and they find is that he's already deceased.
Yep.
At that point, it is standard protocol to not move the body until the medical examiner, coroner, whatever gets there. And it's standard procedure to take pictures of the crime scene.
Yep.
They did
secure the crime scene.
They didn't take pictures. So we have no pictures of
his body
or anything like that. And they moved him before anybody else got there.
Yep.
Definitely supports the theory that he got caught literally with his pants around his ankles, and they didn't want that getting out, and they didn't want that tarnishing his image.
Yep.
So, I mean, again, we're back to it's personal. So this all circles back around, again, to what we talked about in Blind Injustice, tunnel vision.
Yep. Well, and bringing Sean into this case, Sean literally goes to this Walgreens to buy diapers. Of all things. How in the world are you going to say that somebody that's just coming in and out of a Walgreens to buy diapers, out of probably any other amount of people that were going into that Walgreens to get whatever,
because Sean fucked
pin
up.
it on him?
Sean fucked up. Sean told them he was there.
Yeah, because he's just thinking, I'm going to buy diapers.
Because
what's wrong with that?
Why worry about it?
Because they asked him, what do you know about the Mulligan murder? And he's like, I don't know.
I don't fucking know. I was just buying diapers.
He's like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. I happened to be at the Walgreens that night. Can't believe it happened at the same time, same place. Which if he did it, why would he put himself at the time and place of the murder?
Absolutely.
No one does that.
No.
And they ask him these questions directly after he finds out that his cousins have been brutally murdered in their apartment that he shares with them.
Yep.
Because, and this does make sense. In fairness, this makes sense. He was one of the first people they questioned as a semi-suspect in the murders of his cousins. That makes sense because he lived with them. I get that connection. I can understand that.
At the bare minimum, you're going to want to talk to him to get any information about them or who potentially other could have murdered.
Yeah.
Right. But how do you go from you murdered your cousins to, oh no, you didn't do
You're
that,
a cop killer.
but you murdered this cop? Like, how did they even connect that? How did they even know to ask Sean?
I think they were just asking him on a whim because they didn't know. They didn't look for the diapers or the receipt until he told them where they could find it, and that's when they saw the timestamp. Because I didn't even think he said that he was around there at the Walgreens around the time that the murders happened. I think he just said he was at Walgreens that night. And then when they saw the timestamp, they saw he was there at 3:01, and then the murder happened around 3:45. So they're like, oh shit, this is around the time that it happened.
And now, once they've now honed in on their suspect, he's our man, we're going to find the evidence, and we're going to make what evidence we do find fit him.
Right.
So what do? They get an eyewitness.
Yep.
So speaking of that tunnel vision and linking Sean to the crime, even though there's not really much they're going off at this point, what do you make of the fact that there was no forensic evidence linking Sean to the crime? There was nothing on Mulligan's car, no prints, no DNA, nothing on the guns that he supposedly had. The prosecution claims that Sean not only took the guns from the scene, but carried them into the taped-off secured apartment and then had them taken out again. So, like, what do you make of all of this?
I mean, that just goes to show that actors in the criminal justice system seeking a conviction will do and say and coerce whatever they can to get that conviction. They, like, what Professor Godsey was talking about in his book, where as a prosecutor, he would tell the experts what he needed to obtain a conviction at the time. Like, that's pretty clearly what happened here. They found people connected to Sean. They did everything they could to find anybody that could pretty much testify or provide evidence in this case, told them what they needed, and they got it. They built a case against Sean out of him simply buying a diaper.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that was, in Blind Injustice that Godsey, wrote about was notable cause corruption. These are, most of the times the corruption happens by good actors trying to do this for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. They'll cut corners, they'll fudge evidence, they'll fudge statements because they're trying to do the right thing.
Right. They truly, genuinely believe that they have found the person that did it.
But not in this case. These aren't good actors,
no,
good apples, whatever, trying to do the right thing.
These are just shitty people.
These are the dredges of humanity.
Yes.
These are people that were picked on as a kid, and now they have a gun and a badge, and they're God. And they're making the decisions. They're becoming the judge, jury, and executioner in these cases. These aren't notable cause corruption cases. Neither one of these cases are.
No.
There's
Absolutely
no
not.
intention of no good intention here for their actions. They literally are just bad people.
Right. And look at how the vast majority of people that are actors in the criminal justice system, whether they're prosecutors, whether they're judges, whether they're defense attorneys, police officers, whomever, that notable cause, the vast majority just want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Yes, they may tunnel vision in on a suspect. Yes, they may have these biases that are influencing these cases and obtaining convictions that are wrong, and that is never excusable. But they are trying to do the right thing. Yeah. But it is these cases where there are truly just bad actors, like Doug Evans in the Curtis Flowers case, and all, like, literally anyone involved in the Sean Ellis case that wasn't on the defense team. how much they just fuck it up for everyone.
Yeah, because there wasn't. There were no fingerprints. Sean's fingerprints were nowhere to be found.
No,
in anything
never.
here. And the only two pieces of fingerprint evidence that they had, quote unquote, is they find a smeared handprint on the door of Mulligan's car, and supposedly one single fingerprint on the clip or the gun that was found that supposedly, was the murder weapon. And it happens to be Sean's girlfriend. Sean's girlfriend, who they bring in as a witness to get her statement. And then while she's giving her witness statement, she's not a suspect, mind you. While she's giving her witness statement, they ask her for her fingerprints. This is before they find the gun.
Yep. Well, and let's talk a little bit about the girlfriend as well, and how they bring her in as a witness to achieve and obtain testimony against Sean, and they obtain that by threatening to take her child away from her if she does not provide that false testimony. And after that, they magically find a fingerprint of her on the murder weapon.
One fingerprint.
That is truly fucked up. That you are going to use that woman's child against her and threaten to take that child away to obtain falsified evidence.
Because any parent that you use their child against them is going to do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
You're literally, well, not literally, you're figuratively holding a gun to her child's head.
Yeah.
And saying, do this or I'll shoot them.
Absolutely.
That's what you're doing. And, again, in my 16 years of working in the legal field, I've never heard of a witness being fingerprinted. Granted, I worked in, small town Huntington, West Virginia, but, why would you need a witness's fingerprints? Why?
You don't.
And then all of a sudden you find the gun and you find one fingerprint?
And you're going to threaten to take her kid away?
The corruption ran way deeper than these couple cops. It really did. The DA in this instance wasn't as dirty and corrupt as Doug Evans was in Curtis Flowers' case.
But the ADA that prosecuted the case was.
Yeah, but even, she's the one that threatened her.
Yep, she was the one that threatened to take the kid
She's the
away.
one we can take your kid away. And at what point do you just say, you know what, I'll say whatever you want me to say?
I think what really gets me at that point is she started off by acting so friendly towards Tia Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Tia kept saying, no, Sean didn't do this, and wouldn't say what she wanted to say, that's when she flipped and turned and said, I can take your son away, right?
She tried to get her to trust her.
Yep.
She tried to get her to trust her. And when that didn't work, she threatened her.
Yep.
And, again, goes back to, your confirmation bias and your tunnel vision.
Yep. Well, and we've talked about the guns. We've talked about how this singular fingerprint from Tia, the girlfriend, was found on a gun. Let's talk about how these guns went missing and how they were randomly found by Brazel, who, turned against the other cops. Walker, in this case, testifies that Sean Ellis brought the guns from his cousin's apartment, the one who had just been murdered.
Which is supposedly secured from the murders.
Taped off, has security.
And hides them under a nightstand. But then they're found mysteriously in a box in the woods.
Well, supposedly they had another friend who brought the guns, and then dropped them off in that empty abandoned lot.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is how Sean can touch these guns, bring them into Tia's apartment, but no other traces of Tia or Sean are on the gun, or the guy who dropped off the guns.
But Tia's fingerprint gets on
But
there.
a single, somehow supposed fingerprint is on a clip. How is there nothing else but they were sitting in two places where Sean has been frequently, a place where Tia lives, and apparently at least two people have touched them, if not three. And Sean's just supposed to walk on into a secured, taped off scene, grab these guns, because that's not suspicious, walk on out as a murder suspect?
Yep.
Make it make sense.
We can't. No one can.
Yeah, and the one that they even tried to pin the actual shooting on, the guy that he was with that night, is, they couldn't even really match his fingerprints to the smudged hand mark, which is who they said, that belonged to. They had to like overlay it. And I mean, that we're back to the forensics again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the bullet, the forensics for the bullet, the ballistics. A fingerprint isn't, the fingerprint matching isn't 100%. We're back to human fallacy, because we're making points on these fingerprints, and we're making points on the other fingerprint, and then we're matching them up. But we're doing it with our eyes and an ink pen. Probably not an ink pen, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think a good thing to talk about at this point would be Rosa Sanchez, the
Rosa Sanchez,
the prosecution's star witness.
Their only witness.
Their only witness. I'm going to leave the question at that. What do you guys think?
So, Rosa Sanchez, she testifies that she sees Sean and one other man at this Walgreens. She's going in to buy a can of soup. First of all, she says she's
it's a bar soap.
A bar soap.
Only a bar soap.
Only a bar
Who
soap.
the hell buys one bar of soap at Walgreens?
At 3 in the morning.
Right.
But she's in Walgreens for like an hour. She says she goes in before the murder happens.
And she can't find the bar of soap.
She can't find the one bar of soap in a Walgreens.
She finds the bar of soap, but then she browses the card section.
And browses around. Oh,
yeah.
she's in Walgreens for like an hour.
At 3 in the morning.
At 3 in the morning. 19 years old.
Looking for her
at this
soap.
time.
Okay.
Looking for her soap. She testifies that she's...
Her ass must be really dirty if she had to go at 3 a.m. to Walgreens
Probably.
to buy one bar of soap.
Well, her ass is dirty for this falsified testimony, but
For real.
whatever.
True that.
That's a whole other thing. She testifies. Later comes out. She is the niece of one of the detective's girlfriends.
Who has a baby by. And the best part with her is they bring her in to do a photo lineup.
And she misidentifies Sean 3 times.
First guy she points to is, he stalked me. So what do? They don't get a new lineup. They put their hand over it and say,
Cover it up.
Don't focus on him. Focus over here. What does she do?
Picks the wrong one again.
Picks another.
So instead of, getting another lineup again, they take her outside, put her in a cop car.
With a Sarah, who is her
Uncle.
aunt or uncle, whatever.
Her aunt's
relative.
live-in uncle.
It's her aunt's boyfriend who she has a baby by.
Her aunt's baby daddy,
Yes.
basically.
And the other detective.
And Robinson.
Robinson, yep.
And there are witnesses that can testify saying they saw Sanchez crying, and then she comes back and magically...
Well, one of the detectives come back in and say, after 2 minutes out in the car, she can... Let's put the lineup back up. She can do this.
She knows who it is.
She knows who it is.
She's convinced. She knows who it is now.
So they don't get a new lineup. They don't get a new picture lineup.
nay.
They bring the same one out again and say, okay, which one is it? And who does she point to immediately?
After she's already eliminated 2 people.
Sean.
And
She
been
points to
staring
Sean.
at it for how long now?
Yep. And what's very interesting, at that lineup, they had Sean wear the clothes that they assumed, or that had been testified that he was wearing, quote, the night of the murder, in his white button-up shirt, whatever, the hoodie, whatever. While none of the other suspects were wearing that. They purposefully put him in the clothes that they thought were being worn by the murderer.
Instead of just wearing everyday clothes. So of course she's going to pick the clothes that she, quote unquote, thought the murderer was wearing.
Well, and I think it's funny, like when they did the actual lineup, not the photo lineup. You guys are talking about the actual lineup.
Yeah.
When they do that, one of the detectives walks out the door. Rosa's not in there yet. She's not in the room to do the identification at this point. Walks outside after they've got them all lined up. Walks out, is gone for a few minutes and comes back in. And his attorney's like, hold the fuck up. Wait a minute.
At least shuffle the positioning of the
Yeah,
people.
and the cop's like, I'm not going to do that. If you want it done, you do it. I'm not doing that. Are you accusing me of doing something, corrupt? Are you accusing me of doing something, unjust?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes, we are.
Well, hell yeah, I am.
Yep.
So then they bring her, they swip him around. He gets swapped with the person beside him. Still in the same clothes, everybody else.
And he moves over one spot.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Weren't the other ones dressed like in dark clothing?
Yes.
Or
and
the
he was
majority
wearing-
of them were all in
They
dark
were all
clothing?
wearing dark clothing.
And he
he's
had a
wearing
white shirt.
a bright white shirt.
A nice crisp button-up Sunday
Yeah.
morning
So he
going to church shirt.
he stands out regardless.
Yep. And she still doesn't identify him the first two
No,
times.
she doesn't.
I thought
No, she picks, if not both, if not twice, she picks somebody else the first time.
Yep.
she identified him correctly at the lineup because she already knew what his face looked like because of the photos.
No, she identified him correctly during the photo lineup, but not during the actual lineup.
I thought it was reversed.
No, during the photo lineup, she didn't. The first two times, she did not pick him
And
out.
then the
Yeah.
third
But the third time,
found
she
him
did pick out the
Yes.
right person.
But she never picked him out correctly, quote, from the actual lineup. So it's all fucked. It's all fucked.
That is
And that's just that on that. It's all fucked. Just like Mulligan was by Bunny the prostitute.
I mean, yeah. Because, I mean, he had called, and going back to Mulligan and his corruptness, he supposedly has 5 or 6 apartments in this apartment complex, in this expensive apartment complex.
where Tia lives.
On a police salary.
And he has multiple cell phones. One of those is in his console of his car, but no one finds it. It's not logged into evidence. It's not ran to see like what happens. But let me rephrase that. Hold on. Boop, boop, let's go back. It's not officially ran for evidence, but somehow one of the investigators figures out the last person he calls is a lady named Misty, who happens to be someone that he's routinely had sex with since she was like 17, 18.
And
She's
is also a prostitute.
a prostitute. She's the last person he calls.
Yep.
And he says, hey, I'm paraphrasing here, assuming things. Hey, I'm over here at Walgreens. You want a
At the
party?
usual spot.
You want a party? She's like, no, I'm busy. I'm cooking dinner. But I got a friend. Name's Bunny. I'll send her over. So Bunny comes, and who's Bunny with?
Bunny is with One-Eye Mr. C, a.k.a. One-Eye Krusty Pete.
And Bunny comes back and tells Misty later that she had performed oral sex on him, as per his usual. And while she's doing this, Mr. One-Eye shoots him
5 times in the head.
because he's tired of him shaking down the small time drug dealers and the low income people, the people in these low income neighborhoods. He's tired of it. So he takes him out.
Yep.
Did that evidence ever get turned over?
Nope.
They didn't
give a shit about
They didn't even
Krusty
know.
Pete.
They didn't even know Misty or Bunny
Or Krusty Pete.
or Krusty Pete existed.
Nope. It's just like.
And they tried to just to like just poo poo that away and say, well, of course we saw that in there. Well, it wasn't anything important.
We didn't need to book it. But it's just like in the Curtis Flowers case, how they ignored Hemphill as a suspect after holding him for 11 days and all of that. And how they didn't even investigate Doyle, the owner of the gun.
Well, let's go back to tunnel vision
Yep.
for a hot second with Mulligan. Let's go back to tunnel vision.
And our confirmation biases, both of them play
Yep.
into this.
They found their suspect at Sean.
Yep.
But
It's a group of white police officers, white prosecutors against this black man.
well, let's talk about some of the other suspects they could have had. Let's talk about the police officer that told one of his buddies, and the buddy made a report about this, but the report didn't get turned over, of course, that Mulligan had been harassing his 14-year-old daughter.
Yep.
An underage girl. He's harassing her. In explicit ways. Not just, giving her a hard time. I mean, he's literally like
Sexually
harassing her. And the cop the father of the 14-year-old girl, who, like I said, is a cop, tells the other officer, we know that he's at Walgreens every night doing his overtime. We know he's there. We know when he's there.
Doing a
we know,
private detail.
We know he sleeps because
Yep.
we've been by there. We've shaken the car. He doesn't wake up. If he doesn't leave my 14-year-old daughter alone, you're all going to find him with a bullet
in
hole
his head.
to his forehead.
Yep.
1 month later, what do they find?
5 bullet holes in his head.
And Mulligan dead.
Yep. And let's talk about how in the very first episode, probably within the first 5 minutes of this documentary even opening, when they talk about Mulligan being dead, no one could say that they were surprised that he was killed.
Even his cop buddies.
His cop buddies.
Well, he was one of the top 5 complained on detectives in this precinct.
He was the top, I believe, wasn't he?
Well, they said he was in the top 5, like that he was a cop's cop. He was
a cop's cop.
That's what they called him.
Yep. He was a bro.
What was it? What was his nickname? Plainview.
Plainview.
Yeah, everything was always in plain view because he didn't have to do the paperwork if it wasn't in plain view.
You didn't need a warrant if it's in plain view.
Yep.
Yep.
That's probable cause, baby.
Yep.
All day long.
Yep. This is fucked. I hate it here.
So I was just curious about your opinions here as we close out this episode. If you think what do you think would have happened to Sean if this case would have gone to a 4th trial?
Well, first, before we can even dive into that, let's just take a moment to pay some major respect to the defense team that took his case.
Rosemary Scapiccio
Oh
is
my
a
God.
bad bitch.
She is, you want to talk about a cop's cop, she's a defense attorney's defense attorney.
She is, I don't know what type of law I'm going to go into, but I want to be her in whatever field I go into.
Like, if you want to see what a good attorney is, watch Trial 4 on Netflix simply to watch Rosemary Scapiccio do some boss-ass bitch shit. And her other attorney that worked with her, Jaleese McDonough, because she was also very instrumental, but Rosemary Scapiccio gets the majority of the credit.
I mean, she hands him his ass when she's doing oral arguments.
She does not take shit from anybody.
I would quiver in my boots if I saw her walk into the courtroom against me. And so with Rosemary Scapiccio on his side and just all of this corruption that has been overturned, there's no way that had Sean gone to trial for a 4th time, he would have been convicted. There's no way. The first trial against Sean, mistrial, 9-3.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. 9 jurors in favor of his innocence, with 3 saying guilty. Second trial, of course, the DA's office doesn't get what they want, so they try him again. Magically, it's reversed. More jurors are in favor of guilt, but still a mistrial, hung jury. Third time, magically convicted. All within the span of a year. All 3 of these trials happen within the span of 1 year. You want to look at
When does that ever happen?
When does that ever
Never.
happen? Look at the Curtis Flowers case. He had 6 trials that started in 1997, with the last one being in 2010. 6 trials in the span of over 10 years. Sean Ellis gets 3 trials within 1 year.
That's the criminal justice system we know. Not that speedy, we're going to, but it tells you when they want a result and they want it quickly, they will get it.
Yep.
Well, this is because, I mean...
It was a cop.
Is a cop.
Yep.
If this would have been...
Cop's cop.
Anybody else, we'd have been looking at, 10 years for all these again.
I think if it even would have been a lesser known cop.
Oh, yeah.
Or someone who wasn't John Mulligan, I don't think it would have been that quick either.
But,
Yeah.
like you said, going into a 4th trial, I don't know. I think it would have come out differently. I agree. I think that at that point, Rosemary isn't going to let this. She's not going to take their shit, and she's not going to take their lack of evidence laying down.
No.
She's going to stand up and say, no, you're going to give it all to me, or we're just going to go at this forever.
Yep. And all the while, the sad thing is, the people that suffer from this while attorneys play their games like this are those that are wrongfully incarcerated. Because did Curtis Flowers or Sean Ellis ever see the outside of a prison cell while they were not convicted of a crime?
No.
No. Curtis Flowers, 6 trials, either mistrials or convictions overturned, not a felon, not a criminal record,
23
incarcerated for 23 years.
23 years.
Sean Ellis, incarcerated for 21 years, 7 months, and 29 days, as he liked to say. Wrongful conviction on the 3rd trial, gets overturned. Mistrial on the first 2 trials, never sees a day outside of prison.
Nope.
So while these actors of the criminal justice system are fighting each other
And going home every night.
and going home every night, getting a good night's sleep, probably on their Tempur-Pedic mattresses, those wrongfully convicted are stuck in prison. And that brings us to something that we didn't mention in the previous episode, but in the Curtis Flowers case, when they were interviewing one of the Mississippi Supreme Court justices that had formerly served, and we'll talk about this more in the next episode, but he said that that is a prime example of the criminal justice system working. And that is the reason we need reform.
In the final episode, we will wrap up any loose ends, and we will see where Curtis and Sean are today. Thanks for tuning in to this one.